Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his massive warship looking out at the stars through the giant metal windows. The bridge was huge and dark with only the glow of computer screens lighting up his scaly green face. His yellow eyes reflected delight as he studied the star maps, showing their destination a small blue planet called Eartha. Draconian Empire had been conquering worlds for over 200 years, and Vextar had been part of many victories. He was tall even for a Draconian, standing almost 9 feet high with thick armor plating covering his reptilian body. His claws clicked against the metal floor as he walked from station to station, checking on his crew. Behind him 500 warships stretched out in perfect formation. Each ship was enormous, bigger than human cities and covered in weapons that could destroy entire moons. The fleet moved through space like a metal storm cloud, bringing fear to any world unlucky enough to see them approaching. Commander Zektha approached, the Admiral, her own scales gleaming under the bridge lights. She was smaller than Vextar, but her red eyes showed the same cold intelligence that made Draconians such effective conquerors at Merrill. The scouts report we will reach the human system in 6 hours, she said, her voice carrying the hissing accent of a people. Vextar nodded and turned back to look at the star map. The planet Earth appeared as a tiny blue dot surrounded by data readings showing population numbers, technology levels, and military strength. All the numbers were pathetically low compared to what the Draconians possessed. Tell me about these humans again, Commander, he said. Even though he had read the reports many times, Zektha activated a holographic display showing images of humans walking around their cities. The creatures looked soft and weak with no natural armor or claws. Their skin was pale and thin, looking like it would tear easily. Their cities were small and primitive compared to the great metal fortresses of the Draconian homeworld. They are a young species, Admiral, only recently discovering faster than light travel. Their technology is at least 500 years behind ours. Their weapons are chemical-based projectiles and primitive energy devices. Their largest warships are smaller than our escort vessels. The Admiral watched the holographic humans going about their daily lives, completely unaware that death was approaching from the stars. Some were walking in parks with small creatures they kept as pets. Others were gathered in groups, talking and laughing, showing emotions that Draconians found difficult to understand. How many ships do they have? Our spies report less than 50 combat vessels in their entire fleet. Most are exploration ships not designed for real warfare. Their planetary defenses consist of missile batteries and energy shields that our weapons can easily penetrate. Vextar smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. This would be easier than their last conquest. The Zelrani had at least put up a fight for 3 days before surrendering. The humans would probably give up the moment they saw the Draconian fleet. What about their population centers? Commander Zektha manipulated the hologram to show Earth's major cities, sprawling masses of buildings housing millions of humans. The cities looked crowded and disorganized, nothing like the efficient military structures of Draconian worlds. They have several large population centers with over 10 million inhabitants. Each their total population is nearly 8 billion spread across all continents. They seem to prefer living in groups rather than the isolated family units we use. 8 billion, Vextar repeated. The number was impressive but meant nothing if they would not defend themselves. Large populations just meant more workers for the Empire once conquest was complete. The Admiral walked to another station where his weapons officer was checking the fleet's armament. Every ship carried enough firepower, 2 level continents, and they had enough ships to turn Earth's surface into molten rock if necessary. But the Empire preferred conquest to destruction. Dead worlds produced nothing useful. Weapons officer, crawl and how long to disable their defenses? Once we arrive, the weapons officer looked up from his console, his scarred face showing the experience of many battles. Sir, our analysis shows we can neutralize their orbital defenses in less than 30 minutes. Their planetary shields will fall within an hour. After that, and their fleet, if they choose to fight, their ships will be destroyed in minutes. Our energy weapons can cut through their hull armor like it was thin metal. Their weapons cannot even penetrate our basic shielding. Vextar nodded, satisfied with the reports. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The humans would see the overwhelming force arrayed against them and surrender immediately. Most species did when faced with the full might of the Draconian Empire. It was simply logical to give up rather than face complete destruction. But something nagged at the back of his mind as he looked at the images of Earth. The planet looked different from other worlds they had conquered. It seemed more alive somehow. With swirling white clouds and vast blue oceans, most conquered worlds were brown or gray, with little vegetation or water. Earth looked almost too perfect, like something from an ancient paradise. Admiral, we are receiving strange energy readings from the target system. Vextar turned to face his science officer, a thin Draconian with enhanced optical implants that allowed him to read multiple data streams simultaneously. What kind of energy readings? The science officer's claws clicked nervously against his console as he studied the incoming data. I am not certain, Admiral. The readings are unlike anything in our databases. They appear to be coming from the planet's surface, but they do not match any known technology. Could they be natural phenomena? Possible, sir, but the patterns suggest artificial generation. The energy signatures are too regular and focused to be natural. The humans may have technology we are not aware of. Vextar felt a small flutter of concern but quickly dismissed. That human technology was primitive and well documented by their spies. There was no way these soft creatures could have developed anything that would threaten the Draconian fleet. Continue monitoring, but do not let it delay our arrival schedule. These humans probably discovered some new energy source and are experimenting with it. Once we conquer them, we can examine their discoveries. The bridge returned to its normal quiet efficiency as the crew prepared for arrival at Earth. Weapon systems were brought online, shields were activated, and communication arrays were tuned to broadcast the standard surrender demands in the human language. Mantra Vextar returned to his command chair and activated his personal viewing screen showing the approaching solar system. The yellow star grew larger as they traveled, and soon he could make out the small planets orbiting around it. Earth was the third planet from the star, sitting in what their scientists called the habitable zone. As they drew closer, the strange energy readings grew stronger and more complex. The science officer continued to report anomalous readings but could not identify their source or purpose. Vextar decided it was probably some kind of primitive communication system or perhaps an early warning network. Either way, it would not matter. Once the bombardment began, the fleet began to slow as they reached the outer edge of the solar system. 500 warships arranged themselves in perfect attack formation surrounding the small blue planet like predators circling wounded prey. Earth hung in space, looking peaceful and unaware of the doom that had arrived at its doorstep. At Moral, we are now in position to begin the attack. Vextar looked at Earth one final time, noting how the sunlight reflected off its white clouds and blue oceans. Soon those same oceans would be boiling under Draconian energy weapons, and those clouds would be filled with smoke and ash from burning cities. Open a communication channel to the planet, he ordered. It was traditional to offer surrender terms before beginning bombardment. The Empire preferred willing subjects to destroyed worlds, even though the outcome was always the same. The communication officer nodded and activated the long-range transmitters that would carry Vextar's voice across space to reach every radio and television on Earth within moments. Every human on the planet would hear his words and understand that their world now belonged to the Draconian Empire. But as the Admiral prepared to speak, something unexpected happened. The strange energy readings suddenly spiked to levels that made his science officer step back from his console in alarm. Admiral, the energy readings just increased by over 3,000%. They are now stronger than our main reactor output before Vextar could respond. A calm, clear voice came through their communication system, speaking perfect Draconian with no accent or translation errors. Unknown vessels, this is Captain Lee Hyun-woo of the Earth Defense Force. Please state your intentions in our solar system. Admiral Vextar stared at his communication console in complete shock. The voice that had just spoken was calm and friendly, like someone greeting an old friend at a market. The human had spoken perfect Draconian without any mistakes or strange accent. It was impossible for such a primitive species to know their sacred language. How do they know our tongue? He whispered to Commander Ziktha, who was looking equally confused. The commander checked her translation systems twice before answering. Admiral, all our equipment shows they are speaking pure Draconian, not using any translation device. Our spies never reported that humans had learned our language. Vextar felt something cold creep up his spine but pushed the feeling away. These soft creatures had probably captured some Draconian scout ship and learned a few words, nothing more than that. He activated his communication system and spoke in his most commanding voice. Humans of Earth, I am Admiral Vextar of the mighty Draconian Empire. Your pathetic world now belongs to us. Surrender immediately and your deaths will be quick. Continue to resist and we will turn your planet into burning ash. You have exactly 60 seconds to respond with your complete submission. The Admiral expected to hear crying or begging or angry shouting like other species did when faced with Draconian might. Instead, the same calm voice responded almost immediately. Thank you for the introduction, Admiral Vextar. We appreciate you taking the time to visit our solar system. However, we must politely decline your generous offer of conquest. We have been managing our own affairs quite well and prefer to continue doing so. If you would like to discuss trade agreements or cultural exchange, we would be happy to arrange a meeting. Declined. Vextar could not believe what he was hearing. No species in the history of the Empire had ever declined conquest. It was like a small insect declining to be stepped on by a giant. The very idea was so ridiculous that several bridge crew members started laughing until the Admiral silenced them with a look. Commander Ziktha leaned closer to whisper, Sir, perhaps they do not understand the situation. Should we show them a demonstration of our power before Vextar could answer? The human voice came through their speakers again. This time there seemed to be slight amusement in the tone, as if the speaker was enjoying a private joke. Admiral, we detect that you have 500 warships in your fleet. That is quite impressive. We also notice that your weapons are powered up and your shields are active. We hope this does not mean you plan to do something unforeseen. The science officer suddenly looked up from his console with wide eyes. Admiral, I am reading massive energy spikes all around the planet. The signatures are appearing everywhere at once. Show me, Vextar commanded. The main viewing screen changed to display Earth, but now the planet looked completely different. Instead of the peaceful blue world they had seen before, Earth was now surrounded by thousands of glowing points of light. Each point pulsed with energy readings that made the Draconian ships look like tiny candles next to burning suns. What are those things? The science officer worked frantically at his controls, trying to make sense of the readings. Sir, they appear to be defensive platforms, but the energy output from each one is impossible. They are showing power levels equivalent to our entire fleet. That cannot be accurate. Check your instruments, sir. I have run diagnostics 3 times. The readings are correct. Each of those platforms has more firepower than our largest battleship, and there are over 10,000 of them. Vextar felt his confidence beginning to crack like old armor under stress. 10,000 defensive platforms, each stronger than his best ships. How was that possible? The humans were supposed to be primitive, barely able to travel between stars. The calm voice spoke again, interrupting his racing thoughts. Admiral, we really would prefer to handle this peacefully. Your ships are welcome to visit our system, but we cannot allow any hostile actions. Please power down your weapons, and we can discuss this like civilized beings. The words hit Vextar like a physical blow. The Draconians were the most civilized species in the galaxy. They had art, literature, philosophy, and technology beyond the dreams of lesser races. These humans were calling them uncivilized. Sir, what are your orders, Commander? Ziktha asked quietly. Vextar looked around his bridge at the crew who had followed him through dozens of successful conquests. All of them were looking at him with uncertainty and fear in their eyes. They had never faced a situation like this before. No enemy had ever been stronger than the Draconian fleet. Show them our power, he finally said, his voice harder than steel. Target one of their defensive platforms and destroy it. Let them see what happens when they refuse. The Empire, the weapons officer hesitated. Sir, the energy readings from those platforms suggest they may have significant defensive capabilities. I do not care about their defensive capabilities. Fire all main guns at the nearest platform. The weapons officer reluctantly activated the firing sequence. Energy beams that could crack planets shot out from the flagship, followed by similar beams from a dozen other ships. The combined firepower was enough to destroy a small moon, and it all focused on a single glowing point near Earth. The beams struck the platform and simply disappeared like drops of water falling into an ocean. The platform did not even flicker or show any sign that it had been attacked. It continued to pulse with the same steady rhythm as if nothing had happened. Fire again, Vextar shouted. This time 50 ships fired simultaneously, sending enough energy to destroy an entire city. The result was exactly the same. The beams struck the platform and vanished without causing any damage whatsoever. The human voice came through their speakers again, still sounding perfectly calm and friendly. Admiral, that was quite a light show, but we really must insist that you stop shooting at our defense grid. It is considered rather rude in our culture. Light show? The Admiral had just fired enough energy to level mountains, and the human called it a light show, sir. The science officer called out urgently. The platforms are moving on the viewing screen. The thousands of glowing points began to shift position, moving in perfect coordination like dancers following music that only they could hear. They formed geometric patterns around Earth that seemed to pulse and flow with mathematical precision. Admiral Vextar, this is Captain Li Haiyan-Wu again. I think there may be some confusion here. You seem to believe that you can conquer our world using superior military force. However, we have been observing your species for quite some time, and we know that you respond well to clear demonstrations. What do you mean observing us? Vextar demanded. That captain's voice remained friendly, but now there was something else underneath it, something that made the Admiral's scales crawl. We have been watching the Draconian Empire for over 300 years. We know about your conquest of the Zelrani, the Korthon, and the Maselli. We know about your military tactics, your technology, and your weaknesses. That is impossible. Our empire spans dozens of star systems. No primitive species could observe us without being detected. Captain Li Haiyan-Wu seemed to chuckle softly. Admiral, you keep using the word primitive. I think you may need to reconsider your definitions. We have been traveling between stars since before your species discovered fire. We have been watching over younger civilizations and protecting them from threats they were not ready to face. The Admiral felt reality shifting around him like the deck of a ship in a storm. What the human was saying made no sense. It contradicted everything the Empire knew about galactic history. If that were true, why did you not stop us from conquering other worlds? Because those species needed to learn and grow through their own experiences. We only intervene when a species it becomes a threat to the stability of the galaxy. Your recent actions suggest that the Draconian Empire has reached that point, Commander. Ziktha grabbed the Admiral's arm. Sir, we should retreat and report this to the High Command. No, Vextar said through clenched teeth. These humans are lying or using some kind of trick. We are the strongest military force in the galaxy. We will not be defeated by soft creatures who have barely learned to leave their own planet and the viewing screen. The defensive platforms suddenly stopped moving and formed a perfect sphere around the Draconian fleet. Each platform aimed directly at a different ship like predators selecting their prey. Admiral, this is your final warning. Please power down your weapons and prepare to receive our diplomatic team. Any further hostile action will be met with appropriate response. Vextar looked at the thousands of platforms surrounding his fleet, each one capable of destroying his fleet, each one capable of destroying his ships with ease. For the first time in his long military career, he realized that he might have made a terrible mistake, but Draconian pride ran deeper than fear, and the admiral had never surrendered to anyone. All ships prepare for full combat, he commanded. We will show these humans what happens when they threaten the Draconian Empire. Admiral Vextar raised his clawed hand above the red attack button that would signal 500 warships to unleash everything they had. The bridge fell silent, except for the humming of weapons charging to full power. Every Draconian on every ship waited for the command that would turn Earth into a burning wasteland. Attack, he roared, bringing his hand down hard. What happened next would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. 500 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy fired simultaneously. Their combined firepower could have destroyed entire star systems. Plasma beams, energy cannons, particle accelerators, and fusion torpedoes all launched at once, creating a light show that could be seen from other planets, but none of the weapons reached their targets. The energy beams simply stopped in space, hanging motionless like frozen lightning. The plasma charges cooled and drifted away harmlessly. The torpedoes slowed down until they were barely moving, then gently floated off in random directions like lost children. The particle beams spread out and became as harmless as sunlight. Admiral Vextar watched in horror as the most devastating attack in Draconian history became nothing more than a pretty light display. His weapons officer was frantically pressing buttons, trying to understand why their systems had failed. Sir, all weapons show green status. Everything should be working perfectly. Fire again, Vextar commanded, his voice cracking with desperation. The second attack was just as massive and just as completely useless. Every weapon fired, but none of them worked properly. Energy dissipated into space. Missiles changed course and flew away from Earth, and the advanced targeting systems started showing impossible readings, like trying to hit targets that were everywhere and nowhere at the same time. On the main viewing screen, something new appeared. Human ships were rising from Earth's atmosphere, but they looked nothing like the primitive vessels described in intelligence reports. These ships were sleek and beautiful, moving through space like living creatures swimming through water. They had no visible engines or weapons, but they glowed with the same energy that surrounded the defensive platforms. This is Commander Park Minho of the Human Defense Fleet. The voice was different from Captain Li Hien-Wu, but just as calm and friendly. Attention, Draconian vessels, you are being taken into protective custody. Please do not resist and you will not be harmed. We understand this situation is confusing, but we will explain everything once you are safe. Protective custody. Admiral Vextar could not believe what he was hearing. His fleet was not being attacked or destroyed. They were being arrested like common criminals caught stealing from a market. How many human ships are there, Commander? Zekta asked while studying her sensor readings. The commander worked at her console for several minutes before answering. Sir, I count approximately 200 vessels, but the readings keep changing. It appears they can appear and disappear at will. As if to prove her point, several human ships suddenly materialized inside the Draconian formation, moving between the massive warships like fish swimming between rocks. One of the human vessels was so close to the flagship that Vextar could see through its transparent hull. There was a young woman inside who looked completely relaxed, as if flying through a hostile alien fleet was as normal as taking a walk in a garden. The woman noticed the admiral watching her and waved cheerfully through the hull of her ship. Then she spoke, and her voice came through their communication system, even though there was no way the signals could penetrate their shielding. Hello, Admiral Vextar. I am Lieutenant Kim Sora. Please keep your crew calm while we bring you down to Earth. We have prepared comfortable accommodations for everyone. Before Vextar could respond, he felt his ship beginning to move, but not from its own engines. Something was pulling the massive flagship toward Earth, despite the fact that he had ordered full reverse thrust. The engines were running at maximum power, trying to escape, but they might as well have been trying to push against a mountain. Sir, we are losing altitude, the navigation officer reported, his voice tight with fear. All ships in the fleet are being pulled toward the planet. Our engines cannot overcome whatever force they are using around them. Other Draconian ships were also being drawn toward Earth. Some tried to fight the pull by firing their engines at full power. Others attempted to break free by rotating or changing direction, but nothing worked. Every ship in the fleet was being gently but irresistibly pulled down through space toward the blue planet. Bilitha human ships accompanied them during the descent, occasionally offering helpful advice about atmospheric entry procedures or suggesting that the Draconians might want to secure any loose objects before landing. Admiral Vextar found their politeness more terrifying than any threat could have been. As they passed through Earth's upper atmosphere, the Admiral got his first close look at the planet's surface. What he saw made no sense. According to everything the Empire knew about human civilization, the cities were not the primitive settlements shown in their intelligence reports. Instead, vast crystalline structures rose from the ground like frozen waterfalls reaching up toward the sky. Gardens and parks covered enormous areas with plants and trees arranged in patterns that seemed to shift and change as he watched. Rivers flowed uphill in some places, creating impossible waterfalls that fell toward the sky. Lakes hung suspended in the air like giant teardrops reflecting sunlight in all directions. "This is not the planet from our reports," Vextar whispered. Commander Zeke. Thor was staring at her instruments, trying to make sense of the readings. "Sir, the technology levels we are seeing are thousands of years beyond anything in our databases. These humans are not primitive at all." The Draconian ships were guided to landing areas that had somehow appeared in the landscape. Just as they needed them, massive platforms rose from the ground, providing perfect landing spots for vessels that had never been designed to land on planetary surfaces. The platforms adjusted themselves to match each ship's size and configuration, as if they were alive and thinking. As soon as the flagship touched down, Admiral Vextar felt the artificial gravity shift to match Earth's natural pull. The air recycling systems automatically adjusted to process the local atmosphere, which turned out to be perfectly breathable for Draconians. A gentle voice spoke through the ship's speakers, welcoming them to Earth and inviting them to disembark whenever they felt ready. "Sir, what are your orders, Commander?" Zeke asked. Vextar looked around his bridge at crew members who were trained to conquer worlds but had never been in a situation like this. Their mighty fleet had been defeated without a single shot being fired. Their weapons had been made useless and their ships had been captured as easily as picking fruit from a tree. The Admiral realized that everything he thought he knew about humans was wrong. These were not primitive creatures struggling to understand the universe. They were something far more advanced and powerful than the Draconian Empire had ever imagined. A soft chiming sound filled the bridge and Captain Lee Heinwu's voice returned to their speakers. "Admiral Vextar, we would like to invite you and your senior officers to join us for a meal. We have prepared food that your species will find nutritious and pleasant. We think it would be good to talk about why you came to our system and what happens next." The invitation was delivered with the same calm friendliness that had marked all human communication, but now Vextar understood that he was not hearing the words of equals. He was listening to beings who could have destroyed his entire fleet in seconds but had chosen mercy instead. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Vextar realized that he was completely and utterly defeated, not by superior weapons or clever tactics, but by encountering a species so far beyond the Draconian Empire that the very idea of conquest had become meaningless. He looked at his crew one final time as their commander then slowly reached for the controls to open the ship's airlocks. It was time to learn what these humans really were and why they had been hiding their true nature from the galaxy. Admiral Vextar stepped out of his ship onto the crystal platform that had risen from Earth's surface to catch his massive vessel. The air was warm and clean, with a sweet smell that reminded him of flowers from his home world, but underneath that pleasant scent was something else, something that made his ancient instincts scream warnings he could not understand. The platform was made of some kind of living crystal that pulsed gently under his feet, changing color from deep blue to soft green. As he walked, each step felt perfectly secure, despite the fact that the material looked like it should be fragile as glass around him. His crew members were also disembarking from the ship, their movements nervous and uncertain. Commanders stayed close to his side, her hand resting on her weapon, even though she knew it would be useless against beings who could stop energy beams in mid-space. "Sir, something feels wrong about this place," she whispered. Admiral Vextar knew what she meant. The planet felt old, not just old like an ancient building, but old like something that had existed since the beginning of time itself. The very air seemed to hum with power that made his scales tingle and his teeth ached. Captain Lee Heinwu approached them, walking across the crystal platform as if he had done it 1,000 times before. He was smaller than most humans Admiral Vextar had seen in intelligence reports, but there was something about the way he moved that suggested incredible strength hidden beneath his quiet manner. "Welcome to Earth, Admiral," the captain said with a warm smile. "We are honored to have visitors from the Draconian Empire, even if the circumstances are a bit unusual." "Unusual," Vextar repeated, his voice harsh with anger and confusion. "You have captured my entire fleet, disabled our weapons, and brought us here against our will. I would call that an act of war, not unusual circumstances." Captain Lee nodded thoughtfully. "I understand your frustration, Admiral, but please consider this. We could have destroyed every ship in your fleet before you even entered our solar system. We chose not to because we believe in giving every species a chance to learn and grow." Words hit Vextar like a physical blow, because deep in his heart he knew they were true. The humans had demonstrated power beyond anything the Draconian Empire possessed yet. They had used that power only to stop his attack, not to retaliate. Why? Vextar asked the question that had been burning in his mind since the battle began. "Why are you so much stronger than our intelligence reported? Why did you hide your true capabilities?" Captain Lee gestured toward a group of buildings that seemed to grow from the crystal platform as they watched. The structures were beautiful beyond description, with walls that shifted color and shape like living things. Gardens appeared between the buildings, filled with plants that seemed to glow with their own inner light. "Perhaps it would be better to show you rather than simply tell you," the captain said. "Please follow me and bring as many of your officers as you wish. We have much to discuss, and I think you will find the truth more interesting than any lie we could tell." Admiral Vextar found himself walking beside the human captain through gardens that defied every law of physics he understood. Trees grew in spirals that reached toward multiple suns that had appeared in the sky. Rivers flowed through the air in gentle curves while fish swam through the water as if gravity meant nothing to them. "This is impossible," he muttered. Captain Lee heard him and smiled. "Nothing is impossible, Admiral, only improbable. We have learned that the universe is far more flexible than most species." Realized they entered a building that was larger inside than outside, with rooms that seemed to stretch forever in all directions. The walls showed images of space and time flowing like water, while soft music played from sources that could not be seen. Admiral Vextar felt his understanding of reality beginning to crack. "Like old armor under too much stress. Please sit, Captain," Lee said, indicating chairs that formed themselves from the floor as needed. "We have prepared refreshments that your species will find pleasant." The food that appeared was indeed pleasant, tasting like the best meals from the finest restaurants on the Draconian homeworld, but Admiral Vextar barely noticed what he was eating. His attention was focused on the images flowing across the walls, showing scenes that made no sense. "Those are memories," Captain Lee explained, following his gaze. "Moments from the history of our galaxy going back billions of years. We have been watching and recording everything that happened since the first species developed intelligence billions of years," Vextar whispered. "The Draconian Empire is only 10,000 years old. How can humans have existed for billions of years?" The captain's expression became more serious. "We are not exactly what you would call humans, Admiral, though we choose to appear in this form when dealing with younger species. We are what your ancient texts call the Voidwalkers, though we prefer to think of ourselves simply as gardeners. Voidwalkers." The words sent ice through Admiral Vextar's veins. Every Draconian child learned the old stories about beings who could walk between dimensions and bend reality to their will, but those were just myths, legends, created to explain things that ancient Draconians could not understand. Captain Lee waved his hand, and the images on the walls changed to show the Draconian homeworld not as it appeared now, but as it had looked millions of years ago, when the first Draconian ancestors had crawled out of primordial swamps. "We were there when your species took its first steps toward intelligence. We guided and protected you through the dangerous early years when cosmic events could have ended your entire evolutionary line." The images showed massive asteroid impacts that had been deflected away from the Draconian system, solar flares that had been absorbed by invisible barriers, hostile alien species that had been quietly relocated to other parts of the galaxy before they could discover the developing Draconian civilization. "You protected us." Vextar could barely form the words. "We protect all developing species," Captain Lee said gently. "That is our role in the universe, to watch over younger civilizations and help them grow until they are ready to take their place among the mature species of the galaxy." "Then why are you stopping us now? Why did you capture our fleet if you have been protecting us all along?" The captain's expression became sad. "Because protection has limits, Admiral. When a species becomes a threat to others, when they begin conquering and destroying rather than growing and learning, then we must intervene. Your empire has reached that point." Admiral Vextar felt the last of his pride crumbling like sand. The mighty Draconian Empire that had conquered 17 star systems was nothing more than a child playing with toys in the eyes of these ancient beings. Everything he had believed about Draconian superiority was an illusion. The images on the walls now showed other species that had reached the same point in their development. Some had listened to the Void Walkers and changed their ways, becoming peaceful members of a galactic community that Vextar had never known existed. Others had refused to change and had simply disappeared from history. "What happened to the ones who refused to listen?" he asked. Captain Lee was quiet for a long moment. "They were relocated to dimensions where they could continue their aggressive behavior without harming others. We do not destroy species, Admiral, but we cannot allow them to destroy others either." That Admiral understood now why his weapons had failed, why his ships had been captured so easily. The beings he was dealing with did not just have advanced technology. They had power over the fundamental forces of reality itself. Fighting them would be like trying to defeat the laws of physics. "What happens to us now? That depends entirely on you and your people," Captain Lee said. "You can choose to learn and grow, to become part of the larger galactic community that exists beyond your current understanding. Or you can continue on your current path and be relocated somewhere that your aggressive nature cannot harm developing species." Admiral Vextar looked around the impossible room at the flowing images of galactic history and felt something he had never experienced before in his entire military career. He felt small and ignorant, like a child who had just discovered that the universe was far larger and more complex than he had ever imagined. The choice was his, but he already knew what he had to do. 6 months after the disappearance of the Draconian fleet, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. News of what happened at Earth spread like wildfire through space stations and colonies across dozens of star systems. Species that had lived in terror of Draconian conquest suddenly found themselves free to develop and grow without fearing. The Zelrani homeworld, which had been conquered by the Draconians just 2 years earlier, Prime Minister Valandra stood before a crowd of celebrating citizens. The Draconians who had ruled their world with iron claws were gone, recalled to Earth by their new human allies. The Zelrani were free to rebuild their civilization according to their own values and dreams. "The humans sent us this message yesterday," she announced, holding up a crystal device that projected Captain Lee Hyenwoo's image. "They say that any species who was conquered by the Draconians is now free to govern themselves. They offer friendship and assistance. but they will not rule over you. As similar scenes played out across the galaxy as former Draconian colonies learned that their oppressors were no longer coming back. The fear that had gripped entire star systems for generations was lifting like morning fog, revealing a universe full of possibilities that had been hidden for too long. But the most dramatic changes were happening on Earth itself, where Admiral Vextar was learning what it meant to be part of something larger than conquest and domination. He stood in the crystal gardens that had become his favorite place on the strange human world, watching plants that grew in impossible spirals while thinking about everything he had learned. The last 6 months had been the most difficult and rewarding of his life. The humans had been patient teachers, showing him and his officers the true history of the galaxy and their role as cosmic gardeners. Every day brought new revelations about species he had never known existed and civilizations that spanned dimensions beyond normal space. Commando Zektha approached him carrying a datapad filled with reports from other Draconian ships that had been stationed around the galaxy. All of them had received the same message that Admiral Vextar had sent, explaining what had really happened at Earth and ordering all Draconian forces to cease their aggressive actions immediately. Sir, the latest reports show that 90% of our military commanders have accepted the new reality. She said they are returning to Draconian space to help rebuild our civilization according to the principles the humans have taught us. Admiral Vextar nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and sadness. Pride that his people were capable of change, and sadness for all the years they had wasted on meaningless conquest. The humans had shown them records of what the Draconian Empire could have become if they had chosen cooperation instead of domination. What about the remaining 10%? he asked. They have requested relocation to the combat dimensions, the commander replied. The humans have agreed to transport them to realms where they can continue fighting without harming developing species. Some beings simply cannot change their nature. Admiral Vex understood this was the choice that Captain Lee had offered him and his people. They could evolve and join the galactic community, or they could remain as they were in places where their aggression could not hurt others. It was a merciful solution that honored both the need for growth and the reality that not everyone was ready to change. A familiar voice spoke behind him, and he turned to see Captain Lee Hyanwu approaching through the crystal gardens. The human captain had become something like a friend over the past months, though Admiral Vextar was still learning what friendship meant to a species that could reshape reality with their thoughts. Good morning, Admiral. How are you adjusting to your new role? Admiral Vextar had been appointed as the first Draconian ambassador to Earth, a position that required him to help other species understand the new galactic reality. It was challenging work, but far more rewarding than conquest had ever been. It is difficult, Captain, but good difficult, like learning to use muscles you never knew you had. The hardest part is explaining to other species that the humans are not conquerors themselves. Many find it hard to believe that beings with such power choose not to rule. Lee smiled as they walked together through gardens where flowers sang in harmonious voices and trees bore fruit that tasted like pure starlight. That is understandable, Admiral. Most species assume that power must be used to dominate others. It takes time to learn that true strength comes from helping others grow. They paused beside a fountain where water flowed upward in spiraling patterns that formed temporary sculptures before dissolving and reforming into new shapes. Admiral Vextar had learned that everything on Earth was designed to remind visitors that reality was far more flexible than most beings understood. The galaxy is changing because of what happened here, Admiral Vextar said. The fear is gone, but now there is confusion. Many species do not know how to live without the threat of Draconian conquest hanging over them. Change is always difficult, Captain Lee replied, but it is also necessary. The species of this galaxy have been held back by fear for too long now. When it can explore their true potential. Reports were coming in daily from across the galaxy about remarkable developments. Species that had hidden their advanced technologies for fear of attracting Draconian attention were now sharing their discoveries. Civilizations that had spent all their resources on defense were redirecting their efforts toward art, science, and exploration. The Corthan had revealed that they had developed faster-than-light communication decades ago, but had kept it secret. The Masali was sharing healing technologies that could cure diseases across multiple species. The Beridian Collective had opened their vast libraries to everyone, making knowledge available that had been restricted for centuries. Director Choi Janet arrived from the main complex carrying reports about the newest diplomatic developments. She was one of the humans responsible for managing the transition as the galaxy adapted to its new reality. Her work involved coordinating with hundreds of species and managing complexity that would have overwhelmed traditional governance. Admiral, the Sector Council has voted to establish a permanent embassy here on Earth. Representatives from 47 species want to maintain direct contact with humanity. Admiral Vextar was not surprised. The humans had become the unofficial center of galactic civilization, not through conquest but through demonstration of wisdom and power, combined with restraint. Species across the galaxy were looking to Earth for guidance as they navigated their new freedom. There was also news about individual Draconians who had chosen to stay on Earth rather than return to their homeworld. Some, like Lieutenant Catherine, had become students learning human philosophy and science. Others, like Engineer Morthok, were working with human technical teams to develop new technologies that could benefit all species. The most remarkable change was in Admiral Vextar himself. 6 months ago he had been a conqueror leading fleets to destroy anyone who opposed him. Now he was a bridge between species, helping others understand that cooperation was more powerful than domination. He spent his days in meetings with alien diplomats, sharing what he had learned about human nature and the true structure of galactic civilization. Captain Lee led him to a viewing platform that looked out over the main human city. The structures below shifted and flowed like living things, adapting constantly to the needs of their inhabitants. Ships from dozens of species moved through the sky, carrying diplomats, traders, and students who wanted to learn from humanity. People have given the galaxy a gift, Admiral Vextar said, the gift of knowing that there are beings powerful enough to protect us but wise enough not to control. U.S. Captain Lee nodded as they watched ships from across the galaxy landing and taking off in perfect harmony. It was what we always hoped for, Admiral, a galaxy where every species can grow and develop according to their own nature without fear of being destroyed by others. The transformation was not complete and might never be many. The species was still adjusting to the new reality, and there would always be conflicts and challenges, but for the first time in galactic history there was a foundation of safety and wisdom that made peaceful growth possible. Admiral Vextar looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them his former enemies were building new civilizations based on cooperation rather than conquest. The Draconian fleet had disappeared from Earth, but what they had found here was far more valuable than any territory they could have conquered. They had found their place in a universe that was stranger and more wonderful than they had ever imagined, and they had learned that true strength came not from the power to destroy but from the wisdom to protect and nurture life wherever it might grow.